didn't understand what was happening in South Africa and apartheid. I didn't understand. I'm not going to lie to you. It was a great source of pain for me to hear people talk about my father. But let me tell you, that was only because I was a child.
Him. Wow. Can we give Congressman Jonathan Jackson another round of applause? Wow. What a rousing speech. What a heartfelt tribute from a son to a father. Nobody could have done that but a son to a father. Run, Jesse, run. Rise, Jesse, rise. Walk, Jesse, walk. He did that thing. And we are grateful for Jonathan. He was supposed to speak yesterday, but the Lord knew that today would be his day. And God held it until today. And we had to wait a whole day to hear.
Give all praise to God. You know, I want to speak a little bit. Reverend Jackson and I had a long and strong history that was personal and political. We have loved each other and supported each other through the good and the bad. I knew his heart. I respected his mind and trusted his soul. I wish we could say everyone did. You know, thinking about sometimes, we've had many times that I've been with him in marches and, you know, walking with him. And I remember one particular time we were, I think, in Connecticut. And I think I wore the wrong shoes or something like that. But anyway, I was ready for the march. And so, you know, we had this, he would call me Stevie Doe. Hey, Stevie Doe, Stevie Doe. I said, Jesse. But this particular walk, we're marching, but I was like, how far do we have to go? Oh, just a little bit more, Stevie, just a little bit more. And it got so long that I was like going, trying to hear where I was at, how close we were to where we were gonna stop. We made it, it was beautiful. My feet were hurting a little bit, but it was worth it. This song speaks the truth in my heart.
Ashley is first.
Years before I was born, At the 1988 Democratic National Convention, my beloved father stood before the country and said, "They see me running for the White House, but they don't see the house I'm running from." When I was 15 years old, he took me to that house. We called it a daddy-daughter road trip through the American South, which in our case included the Honorable Reverend Clay Evans and a small caravan of Rainbow Push staff. Intimate. We drove through Montgomery and Selma, through Georgia, and ended in Greenville, South Carolina, where he was born. He walked me down the streets that raised him, showed me his high school, the neighborhoods that formed him, and then stopped in front of a quaint property on Haney Street. He brought me to the front window of the room where my grandmother gave birth to him and said, "This is where I come from." At 15, I nodded with teenage understanding, but now nearly 12 years later, I recognize that he wasn't simply showing me a house. He was teaching me something about beginnings, that even when they are shadowed, they still hold light. That the distance between where you start and where you stand is sacred ground, and that what you build in that distance becomes your character. He used to say that we may not all be famous, but we can all be great. As a child, I thought that greatness meant scale, crowds, platforms, and name everyone knew. As I grew older, I understood he meant something quieter and far more demanding. Greatness was service. It was consistency. It was feeding people when no one was watching. The headlines captured the rallies and the campaigns, but they did not always capture the hospital rooms, the late night calls on behalf of someone the world had already forgotten, the stories he carried from strangers along the way. See, Dad's theology was rooted in the belief that every human being carries inherent worth. And he fought for that truth in places that most people never saw, for people whose names never made the news across decades and continents and causes. And it showed up at home the same way it showed up everywhere else. In the car, and we spent so much of our life in cars, he would reach back his hand to find mine while he was on the phone. It didn't matter who was on the other end of the line, presidents, organizers, global leaders. The call would continue and still his hand would find mine. I understand now that he reached back deliberately every single time, as if to say, while I may be carrying many, I am still holding you. And it wasn't only in the car. It was the classroom visits, the amusement park trips tucked between political storms, the flowers on Valentine's Day, the flowers on my birthday, the flowers when I was sick, just to show his love that showed up every year without fail. My dad loved me out loud. He was relentless about it because it mattered to him. It mattered to him deeply, structurally, the same way that everything mattered to him, that I never once questioned whether I was somebody. Now I understand that those were seeds. You know, my father was always in the business of future-proofing, preparing people and possibilities for a future already on its way. He future-proofed movements, he future-proofed leaders, and in the quietest way, he was future-proofing me, planting steadiness, planting worth, planting faith, preparing ground he might not personally harvest, but believing it would bloom anyway. So today I am not standing here as a historian of his movement. Others will speak to the breadth of what he built far better than I can today. I am standing here as his daughter, the baby of the family, bereft and amazed, and so deeply grateful that enough of his love was poured into me across 26 years that I know I will never run out. Our stories are not parallel, they are intertwined. Dad, the same distance you spoke about between where you start and where you stand shaped you as a leader, and it shaped you as a father. The world watched you bend the moral arc toward justice, and I watched you bend toward me. I am grateful for every mile we tread together, Dad. I love you in every lifetime, and until we meet again, I'll find you in the rainbows. Thank you.
And family, kith and kin. I'm grateful for your warm embrace, For whom I am her namesake, for asking that I stand and serve beside her as one of my father's principal caregivers. I'm so forever thankful to our Lord for providing me with a much deeper bond with our siblings during these past months. I'd also like to take the time to thank what amounts to legions of friends and taxis and Uber rides to and from hospitals. I cannot express, really, the enormity of my gratitude for the round-the-clock security and our team of medical attendants whose numbers over the years have truly been quite massive, extending not only across this incredibly precious city, but quite literally across the nation, across the world. I had the distinct honor of feeding our Father and providing for several of the prescribed home therapies. And the like, while a formidable and dedicated team of caretakers tended to all variety of his growing needs. To that end, there's absolutely no way my conscience would rest without personally thanking Mr. Chris Hodges for befriending our dad's journey with unbelievable care, steadfastness, and a loyalty only comparable to the unduplicable Shelley Davis. And our very own Uncle St. Clair Booker, now deceased, who without a doubt, can never be displaced as our father's irreplaceable wingman. Last but certainly not least, I must thank Mr. Idris Adebi, our senior caregiver, who frankly deserves high recognition for the dedicated and compassionate care he provided for my father. For years, he'd arrive on site to absolutely incredible and increasingly difficult tasks. He'd walk through the door in his princely way, and he'd exclaim so as to be heard by Dad some rooms away, "Good morning, sir. Good morning, Reverend." Dad's eyes, because I was there, Dad's eyes would just beam and occasionally tear. His chest would swell. Mr. Idris was unfailing in alertness to the growing constraints of Dad's physicality and the possibility of its threat to his personhood. I know this because I tried to take careful accounting of Dad's medical care, and in light of this habit of my own mind, I will forever be grateful for the depth of heart brought to his work. Some days ago, I asked Mr. Idris, and by permission of my family, if he would take me on the very longest walk I have ever withstood, and that was to see my father at Leake's funeral home. And because the moment exceeded my capacity, he and our brother, Mr. Stacy Leakes, of the wonderful Leake family, ended up having to support me as well. And now, if it's quite all right, I'd like to step well outside of character and share a few aspects of my own lifelong journey, usually kept under very close lock and key. In the interest of granting further insight into a human being unequaled by category, by quality, by kind, in national and international humanitarian contribution and parental impact, I feel some sense of conscience in this reveal. I'd like to share some of those memories that show Dad, the dad side of my father. During my early formative years, I experienced a great deal of difficulty, great indeed, with schooling. And in many ways, Dad assumed the charge for my home learning, teaching me letters and numbers. He taught me penmanship. He placed his hand atop mine and physically guided my hand, steadying his fingers along lined paper, whether printing block letters or looping letters in cursive. He introduced me to language and really the symbolic system itself. I also recall the sounds of the abacus. The beads would rise and they would fall along rods as we observed numbers being added and subtracted. He taught me to quantify. And following speeches, he'd return home and coach my vocabulary, asking whether I'd understood a particular word or a particular concept. Soon afterwards, he'd have me fetch Webster's, and then placing his index finger atop my own, we'd leaf. We'd leaf through the pages. Dad would make sure that my understanding was clear, so even while seated in congregations and among audiences, he'd repeat a given term or a given concept during a speech and discreetly integrate into call and response. He'd say, looking at me, "Get the point?" My father was actually an introvert. That's quite correct, and even a bit socially awkward. And for this reason was especially sensitive to my own introversion and my own studied ways. So when at home, he'd either call out, "Pooh," that's what he called me.
All right now, Jackie.
"Little Jack." Jackie Pooh. And I hadn't responded. And if I hadn't responded, he'd walk around, searching the kitchen cupboards or atop the refrigerator or under tables where I could be found. Growing up, I'll confess that I could easily be found sleeping between my mom, my dad, and his yellow notepad, where he'd be penning his sermons, starting daily around 4 a.m. Of all of my siblings, I must confess, I slept with my parents for the very longest. At times, Mom would have to run errands and she'd buzz about and Dad would stay behind and he would create makeshift hammocks out of our linens. And he'd swing me round and round, or he'd place me on his head and he'd propel me about, playing airplane. During our legendary and unenviable Chicago snowfalls, he'd walk to my big sister's room or simply turn over where I could be found sleeping between he and Mom. He'd carry me down the stairs, it must have been 3 or 4 in the morning, to the front porch. And there, in the rocking chair, he'd look out the window and he'd say, "Now isn't that beautiful?" And we'd sleep until daybreak. I'm going to finish every word prepared. Every single word prepared from my father's homegoing service. Every member of this congregation is a member of our own family, and I hope very much that you understand. Later in life, he'd insist on coming to stores with me, and he would purchase school supplies, or he'd walk into pharmacies to stand in line with me, or we'd go to movie theaters to catch a flick, and it would be incredibly difficult for me. I'd suffer such incredible, unthinkable embarrassment because time with Dad outside of the house or disembarking from plane, train, or bus meant sharing time and enduring crowds and media attention directed towards us. So I'd rather wait my turn, I'd simply go away, or I'd evade the field of view of cameras. Pretty early on in my 20s, and now I am 50, I came to realize that the truth was that he was, in his own way, hitching a ride on my access to normal. And when I understood this, I'd whisper from time to time in his ear. If I cited what appeared to be a need, I'd say, "You ready for a getaway?" And we'd drive around the town, we'd walk about, or we'd secure a tour somewhere. I remember during my college years, or as I matriculated from one graduate school to another, he'd call, or he would arrive unannounced to check on me and my roommates. He was always the ear, never too busy to listen to hall gossip or to roommate chat or to minister to my or my roommates' personal lives or our academic difficulties. Over the years, we'd tussle ideologically, just for sport. He knew how well I enjoyed jockeying perspectives, and he'd participate gloves off. It was spirited and it was wonderful. He often involved me in speech, writing to hone my own perspectives, concepts, and to test my ability to summarize a spectrum of news developments. It was a lifetime of learning how to engage with civility and with honesty, whether as allies, whether as opponents, and always with openness to broadened vantage. Now, until February 16th, the eve of Dad's transition, I used to tell Dad absolutely everything. And he in turn would entrust his feelings about one thing or another, having to do with his person or regarding our larger life. For years, he literally called me every single day, for as long as he was able to hold a phone. And now in retrospect, it became clear. It became clear that his symptoms had been developing and presenting over the span of many years. My dad would later be diagnosed with progressive supranuclear palsy. And prior to his diagnosis, he'd been experiencing symptoms of motor degeneration, which resembled Parkinson's disease. But early on, some many years ago, he became increasingly prone to quiet speech. We couldn't hear him well, and he would often trip while attempting to ambulate, while attempting to walk. Dad was already asthmatic, but breathing became further impaired, eventually affecting his sleep. His gross and fine motor abilities slowed. His arms, for instance, would extend in more measured ways. Phone dialing became a bit more arduous. The action of handling objects, grabbing, releasing, became more demanding, more cumbersome. His facial expressions, they began to flatten. His overall reaction time began to diminish. Routine tasks required a bit more effort. Phone calling became more labored, necessitating that all of us, all of our family, our broader network, become interpreters. I suppose I became especially good at that function. and many came to rely on me to carry his words through. These mounting occurrences were annoyances and at times embarrassments for him, but not embarrassments of a social variety. Instead, disappointments which disturbed his own sense of internal standards. His ability to communicate, thought itself, became compromised. And when he realized that his cognition was largely unaffected, his ability to think, his ability to process and conceptualize complex information and to generate novel ideas, it remained the same. My own background and training allowed me to rapidly assess the situation at hand and perhaps enabled my navigation through myriad conundrums posed by Dad's illness, which for me appeared to be its own mind-body dilemma. But it was the body, rather than the mind, that was largely affected, leading him feeling dissociated from his former self. And with this knowledge, I was committed to enhancing Dad's sense of wholeness, in spite of the course of his illness. This began, I suppose, my own approach to developing a recovery plan which could integrate his normal intellectual life, his normal routines and enjoyments into daily life. Speech therapy required practice of vocalization and enunciation with alphabet and number recitation. And so we involved phone calls from our friends. Our larger family implemented house visits from many to prompt his continued engagement with the world around him. But all would participate. Siblings participated, grandchildren participated, cousins participated, scores of loved ones participated. I recall when his diet was relegated to puree, and my mother's response was, well, we're going to enlist pureed versions of Thanksgiving and Christmas cuisine every day. So Mom set foot to preparing 3-course meals freshly every single day. And I fed him deliberately, involving his own hands, so he'd purposely feed himself to feel buoyed up in his own autonomy. Very soon into this approach, he latched on and enjoying routes to a sense of independence. I share all of this with you in closing, to highlight my own awareness of my father's impact on me as a child, when he lay his own hand to write and coach my own relationship beyond my interior life into the larger exterior world through learning the alphabet and number. And while heightening my observation of details, I came to realize that our roles had indeed reversed. And all that he taught me as a child were the tools that I used to help him. But in the end, it came down not to tools, but simply the love for someone.
Come on, Jackie. Keep going.
Love for someone whose love could never be repaid. God bless you, Daddy. I honor you, Reverend. I honor you, Reverend. And not job well done. Job singularly done. God bless you.
Yesterday, I listened for several hours of 3 United States presidents who do not know Jesse Jackson. He maintained a tense relationship with the political order, not because the presidents were white or black, but the demands of our message, the demands of speaking for the least of these, those who were disinherited, the damned, the dispossessed, the disrespected, demanded not Democratic or Republican solutions, but demanded a consistent, prophetic voice that at no point in time ever sold us out as a people. And it speaks volumes about who the Reverend Jesse Jackson was. Our message has already been delivered today. I can see it all over my mother's face. Rise, Jesse, rise. Give Jonathan Jackson another great round of applause for delivering our family message to the world. Let's hear it for the congressman. There'll be no different message that leaves this service than the one that Jonathan Jackson has blessed us with. I want to thank my sister Ashley, and on behalf of all of our siblings, there is something about the blood of service that Jesse Jackson has given to all of us. Ashley is an extraordinary individual, a very, very talented young lady, and I am so grateful, we're all so grateful to call her our sister. Thank you, Ashley. A gift to us from our Father. To my sister Santita, whose talents are so extraordinary that I've always wondered why they're so contained. We're so grateful for her scholarship, her input, her thinking, her being our oldest. She doesn't like oldest, she likes eldest sibling. We want to thank Santita in a very special way for her leadership. Give Santita a great round of applause. Let's hear it for Santita. And if we can listen once again to 4 presidents yesterday, 3 of whom happened to be U.S. presidents who did not know my father, we can certainly listen to Jacqueline Jackson. We can listen to Jacqueline Jackson, who cared for my father. Give her the round of applause that she deserves. And last but not least, for 64 years before we heard of progressive nuclear palsy or Parkinson's disease, my father at North Carolina A&T said that he was standing at the cafeteria when he saw a young, fresh woman walking across the campus. And Mommy, at least as the story was conveyed to me, he said something to the effect that you're gonna be my wife one day. And Mama said to him, you're gonna have to work hard to make that the case, my brother. for 64 years, with a particular emphasis since Reverend's diagnosis of initially Parkinson's disease, but a further diagnosis that revealed pseudonuclear palsy. Whether the weather was rain or whether the weather was cold, whether things were going well or things were not going well, the mountaintops that marriages reach as well as the valley that they reach, Jacqueline Jackson has been the enduring force in the ministry of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and she lent him to the world. Give Mrs. Jackson the honor that she deserves. I want to remind everybody that we are burying our father today. And I remind people that I was so grateful that he gave me his name. When he first gave it to me, it was a good name. Jesse Jackson, born March 11th. Just a few short days from now. He had traveled from Chicago Theological Seminary to Selma, Alabama. He sent my mother to Greenville, South Carolina. Because he wanted his firstborn son to be born where he was born. When I was born, the Selma to Montgomery March was entering a new phase, and Mama called Selma to find out to share with my father that his firstborn son had been born, and he was so overwhelmed by the moment that he almost named me Selma. But thank God for Mama's better judgment. My father had a lot of jokes. My father was a funny man. Those of you who knew my father knew that he was an enjoyable man. Whatever the media has to say about him, it has nothing to do with what each and every one of us knows about who Jesse Jackson was and is in our thinking. Being Jesse is not easy. And so Dad and I had worked out some understanding of why he would do this and why I would do that. And a symbiosis occurred in our personality, because what he did affected me one way and what I did affected him the other way. But such was the name Jesse Jackson. And I remember when I was in prison, and I would think about the man who brought Robert Goodman home, who called the Ayatollah in Iran and asked him to release the Americans, and when he wouldn't, he said, at least release the black ones, because America don't use them as a human shield. America don't care. And the Ayatollah heard Reverend Jackson's voice and released the black prisoners. Jonathan and I were in Cuba when Dad brought, I believe, the Mario prisoners home. I think Yusuf and Jonathan were in Iraq when they met with Saddam Hussein and brought a 747 filled with human shields home. And I remember Mama when Daddy would come visit me in prison, and I would think about all of the people my daddy could save. He came to visit me one day, and I said, Daddy, do you think you can get me out of here? He said, I'm trying, son. But don't give up. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. And so yesterday, I began a little statement. And this ain't gonna last but about 4 more minutes because I haven't had a chance to develop it. Howard Thurman. Because the message has already been delivered. Rise, Jesse, rise. I'm specifically hanging around Howard Thurman yesterday because I don't want the media to step on Rise, Jesse, rise in tomorrow's story. It's a calculation. We Jacksons have to think about what we say so we don't have too many messages emanating from the same household. We think about it. Howard Thurman, his family grew up as a sharecropping family, and he had experienced some of the horrific treatment of African Americans in the South, not unlike my father. And his family decided they didn't want young Howard to be a sharecropper, so they put together all of their pennies and quarters and nickels, and they came up with just enough money to make sure Howard Thurman could afford a ticket to go to college. And in the book, which Bill Clinton referenced yesterday with Head and Heart, he dedicates the book to this story. When he went to get his ticket, the broken pieces of his life were in a trunk that his family had given to him with no handles, and he had tied the trunk up with ropes. And the conductor said, "You can get on the train, but your baggage can't." He said in that trunk was all of the broken pieces of his life, his pictures, his clothes, all of his memories, and he wasn't leaving his broken pieces behind. So he went over in the corner of the train station and he began crying because his dreams and his hopes had been thwarted about whether or not he could go to college. And crying and tears and mucus all lay in a pile when he wiped his eyes and he looked up, Mama, and he saw a pair of old rustic boots. He continued to look up and he saw a man in some overalls, and he saw an old black man wearing a straw hat, and he said, "Boy, what you crying for?" And Howard said, "Because I can't take my luggage with me on the train, I've decided not to go to college." And the old man reached in his pocket and he grabbed a little leather sack and pulled out a few coins and bought a ticket for Howard Thurman's luggage. And Howard Thurman says he never got the man's name. And all he remembers was his train was going in one direction, and he saw the old man walking down the train tracks until he faded away. He dedicates his autobiography to the stranger who restored his hope and sent him to college. I just want 2 more minutes to tell you about who my daddy was. You see, when I was in prison, I had to ask my daddy if he was disappointed in me. I announced this little old campaign for Congress on his birthday, October 8th, 2025, because I wanted to remember his birthday as long as I live. You see, when I was in the hole and I looked up and saw the ceiling, I thought about the stranger. And I said to myself, my dad is the stranger. You see, he's the man who can save people from prison and save people and bring them from foreign leadership. He's the man who can go around the world and change it for everybody. He's the man who spoke in the high schools and told young people to stop complaining about what they don't have, to use what they got. He's the one who told them down with dope and up with hope. He's the one who preached your funerals for your families and married your loved ones and helped bring them forward in happily married matrimony. He's the one we turn to at our lowest hours. And so, not only in the life of his family was he hope, but he was a stranger for millions of people who knew not his name. You see, eminent Howard Thurman theologian said that to Howard Thurman, the stranger was the embodiment of God. So when the stranger shows up in our space, I don't care if it's your daddy, I don't care if it's your mama, I don't care if it's someone that you don't get along with, God is trying to tell you something, Judge. I'm done. When Jonathan delivered that message today, on behalf of this family and on behalf of a people, he covered every aspect that I know of my father's life. I am so grateful to each of the iterations of Jesse Jackson that are represented here today. Because we've seen, and you have lifted this family and allowed us the great privilege of representing you in some mighty, amazing places. And so, Santita, to God be the glory for all of the wonderful things that he has done. I am grateful to all of you on behalf of our family. Rise, Jesse, rise.